Real families, real farms, real food. Welcome to Arizona Agriculture Connection with Maricopa County Farm Bureau. My name is Nicole Clements, Executive Director, and I'll be your host. Maricopa County Farm Bureau is the voice of agriculture in a community that thrives on the dichotomy of urban and rural agriculture operations. This podcast is a home for farmers, ranchers, food lovers, prospective agriculturalists, and those looking to connect the food on their plate with the farm that it came from. As we take an inside look at agriculture in Arizona, we will delve into topics like ag technology, policy, food preparation, and everything in between. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform with new episodes every Wednesday. Arizona Agriculture Connection is hosted by Maricopa County Farm Bureau and sponsored by Paloma Ready Mix and Materials, a proud supporter of agriculture and our communities. Be sure to subscribe and share your favorite episodes with your friends. For more interactions, follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Maricopa County FB. Now let's discover some Arizona agriculture. Welcome back, Arizona Aggies, to another episode of Arizona Agriculture Connection. Today, we're excited to have our guest, Michelle Miller. You may know her more so as the Farm Babe online. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. So let's kick it off. Can you share a little bit about your background? I know your story in agriculture kind of spans the country and evolves over time through social media and an internet presence. So can you give us a little background on that?
Yeah, I grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I was a 4-H kid growing up. I did not come from a farming background at all. Like none of my family were farmers, but my friends were farm kids. So every day after school, we would ride horses and do chores. And I always really loved the farm life. And when my guidance counselors and teachers in high school or whatnot said, you should pursue a career in agriculture, you should be a veterinarian or work with livestock in some capacity, I actually ended up moving to Los Angeles. I wanted to try something different, get out of Wisconsin. So I moved to LA, got a degree in the fashion industry, and worked for Gucci on Rodeo Drive. So I was very much the complete opposite of what I do now as a farmer advocate, but I lived in downtown LA and downtown Chicago for all of my 20s and worked in the fashion industry and had a sales career. And then I got fed up with Chicago and moved to Florida, where I was a bartender on a white sand beach and was traveling the world. So I visited all 7 continents, just traveled and backpacked all around the world and found my love for travel. But while I was bartending in Florida, I met a farmer. So Doug and I dated for almost 8 years, and I moved to Iowa to be on his farm back in, so we met in 2012, and then I started the Farm Babe in 2015. So I've been doing the Farm Babe now over a decade as a way to better bridge the gap between consumers and farmers. So that was really kind of how it all started, was just like moving around. And now my tagline is rodeo to the rodeo. So I met this farm boy and moved to Iowa and started learning the real truth about agriculture, which as a city girl, I was like, oh, you have to avoid gluten and GMOs. And, that stuff's just pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, and GMOs are just drenched in chemicals. And like all that stuff that I believed, that is only one side of the story. And it's not the truthful side of the story, but I had never really heard from the farmer before. And so since I had actually become a farmer in Iowa and had just gotten back to my Midwest roots, it just inspired me to want to speak up.
There's so much that people don't know. And when you see one headline in the news, you don't see everything behind it and why we do what we do and how we do what we do. And so bridging that gap, that is more than a full-time job, which you just alluded to. You're running around the country like crazy. But this work is really important. And so on behalf of farmers, thank you for what you do, because it takes everybody sharing their voice. But if you can have a bigger presence and a louder voice, we're very thankful for having that out there.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
So when it comes to farmers sharing their stories online, we're kind of essentially opening the farm gates to people who've never been involved or seen agriculture before. And it can be daunting and intimidating for that farmer. And it makes them hesitant to do so. So do you have any advice on how to maybe kind of take that leap and start sharing your story online, even though it seems a little scary at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was very much a concern for me when I started too, because you do wonder, like, what do I do about the haters? And I got to say that the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But also, the detractors are such a small percentage. Like when people follow you, they follow you for a reason and they're there to support you and you build a wonderful community. So, in the very rare instance that somebody's negative, you just kind of have to ignore it. Or if they have good intentions, you can genuinely respond and reach people outside of your audience, which is huge. So there's really a number of ways that you can do that. But the good news is that when you're building this community, people within your circle and your followers are going to come to your defense likely before you get a chance to even see the comment. So you're building this amazing core group of people that are there for you. And you don't know that 1%, that random detractor, it could be a fake profile, it could be a troll, it could be somebody from another country, somebody that's on drugs or alcohol or under the influence of something. So you really can never let that get to you because a vast majority of people are going to be there to support you.
I know there's a lot of opinions about whether you should engage or shouldn't engage with some of those more controversial comments. And I've seen it both ways. There's advantages and disadvantages to both, I think, but having that educational, informational approach seems to be kind of the best option.
Yeah. And if you can take a look at the person's profile and see if it's like a genuine, normal profile or if it looks like somebody that's off the rocker, that's not worth your time. Some people just want to argue, like they just want to do it to get under people's skin. But if they look like they have a genuine question, then by all means engage. It does get easier with time. I think sometimes in the beginning, you don't know how to respond or you don't know what to say. Do the best you can. And I actually learn a lot from my comment sections. So sometimes I could see somebody that responds on my behalf. And I'm like, I didn't know that. And then you end up down this different path of wanting to learn more. So it gets easier with time and kind of like same with in-person stuff too. Just putting yourself out there, you have so much more to gain, whether it's online or in person. You have so much more to gain. If you're not telling your story, who will? Like somebody else will, and it's not going to be accurate. But it's a really great, interesting, rewarding way to connect with others. And we have to do a better job of that within our industry to share with people outside of the industry. And social media is a great avenue for us to do that.
I think talking about the comment section, so there's a lot to learn in there. And I think when we are trying to figure out, what kind of information do they want? What do they want to learn about? Well, I think the broad answer is they want to learn about it all, right? It doesn't matter. They just want to know everything about where their food comes from. And I think having this kind of ultra curious consumer pool of people is really good for us because they're really going to be engaged with the story that we're telling about, how our farm works and why it works that way. But so going through that comment section, do you find a lot of information for yourself, but also kind of more of a direction of what the consumer is looking to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. It inspires me for new content. Like the comment section is gold. It's my bread and butter because whatever somebody has as a question, somebody else can have as a question. So I always try to use that to my advantage to come up with new ideas and topics.
So, kind of along those lines, but the United States is one of the only countries I think out there that doesn't require an agriculture education credit to graduate. So, while it's an option in some school districts, it's not a requirement, right? So, we have this growing population that is getting further and further away from the farm. So, at this point, your average consumer is 5 generations removed from a farming operation. So, they don't have that knowledge or even that parental or grandparental knowledge from their family to understand agriculture and how it works. So, do you think that this type of medium, having this opportunity on the internet to provide that sort of education in an informal way, can help bridge that gap?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's a way to really showcase who you are. So people follow people and want to feel connected to the people behind their food. And I mean, I used to be really misinformed about agriculture. I believed every myth under the sun. It wasn't until I actually became a farmer and started talking to farmers about it. So I was up in Iowa. We were growing corn, soybeans, cattle, sheep, hay, oats, rye. Like we had a lot of stuff going on the farm. And just the ability to put a face behind that and say, hey, like if you think GMOs are bad or you think feedlots are bad or whatever, here's me as a person growing it, caring about you, connecting with you like you would. So you always want to communicate with others like you would communicate with your best friends. You're never going to win anybody over by being a jerk, but it is a really great way and super impactful to be able to share your story as a person. So agricultural education is very important, and we need a lot more of that in schools, no doubt. But it's also could be a little bit more like real, raw, unfiltered when you are the person behind the camera actually showing what you do, like real time for people all around the world that want to see it.
I think when you get to talking about the myths of agriculture and where your food comes from, and people get hung up on these buzzwords, right? So you've got GMO, organic, and food labeling is an entirely other story. But
Mhm.
when they're thinking about, well, what am I going to go to the store and purchase for my family and know that is good for me and mine, right? So the food labeling topic is really tough to tackle from a farmer perspective because we don't have any control over that. But that's what people are seeing when they're going to the store and what's on their shelf. So what is the best way that we could help them, inform them, and make those decisions that are best for their families?
Yeah, tackling food labels has been the bread and butter of the Farm Babe brand since day one. Is I'm really passionate about debunking myths around what does this mean to the end consumer. So yeah, I think putting it into perspective of why we do what we do, but explaining it in a way that everybody can understand. Like for example, when I talked about how much Roundup or glyphosate we spray on our GMOs, I put it down to a number where it's like, okay, we spray 1 or 2 days a year at the very beginning of the growing season at a rate of 22 ounces per acre. 22 ounces, that's less than 2 beer cans on an area of land the size of a football field. So putting that into something that is relatable for the end consumer, that's like, oh, 2 beer cans on a football field, like that's nothing. Versus sometimes organic. I mean, I know organic farms that spray weekly. And so it's there are organic approved pesticides. People don't understand that. But to understand why people do what we do, where and why, and you know what I mean? So it's like I live in Florida. I used to farm in Iowa, freezing cold winters. Now I'm in Florida where it's a hot tropical climate with lots of rain equals higher pest pressure. We just have a lot more pests to deal with here because things grow and nothing freezes in the winter. So, talking about what we do and why we do it and how is really important because farmers do have tens of thousands of species of insects, weeds, and disease to deal with. So, what do they expect us to do while keeping the world fed? Explaining what we do and why is so important, and also putting things into perspective of the dose makes the poison. And hormones, for example, or antibiotics, antibiotics are an important tool. A vast majority of farmers either don't want to use them or don't need to use them due to improvements in genetics, housing, biosecurity, etc. There's a lot of reasons why we don't have to do that anymore. But explaining if we use antibiotics, there is that withdrawal period. All of your meat is antibiotic free. There is no such thing as added hormones in poultry. The hormones in beef, there is a fraction of a billionth of a gram difference. It's like a drop in an Olympic sized swimming pool. So putting things where people can understand it, where you're not just saying, yeah, we spray. Well, what are you spraying? When, why, where, for what? What's going on? What's in my food? And nobody's being transparent. And it's not that farmers have anything to hide. It's just being transparent and saying, here's what I'm spraying, when, why, and how is pretty cool. When we actually explain it, like, here's what it is, then it's offering transparency. And I think there's never been a better time for us to share transparency in our practices.
It's kind of that, well, we've always done it this way. And like the farmer never takes a second to stop and think, well, like, why have we done it this way? Or why is this the way we applicate? And so when they stop and they have to explain it, I think that kind of puts us on similar ground, right? So we're
Yeah.
we're learning more about what we're doing and sharing that with the consumer and say like this is the reason. Like there's a reason for everything that we do. And
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
either for the betterment of the crop or the animals. We care about the land. Farmers are the original environmentalists, I think is one of my favorite little catchphrases, because we
Yeah.
have to work in sync with the land, or we're not going to be able to be a sustainable operation. And who wants to farm for 5 years and then say, "Hey, yeah, I think I'm done." It's not a career that we
Yeah,
switch in
right.
and out of like a general public career would be. So there's a lot invested, and I think being able to kind of educationally share that story kind of puts a face to the name, right? Like, yes, I'm
Yeah.
a farmer and yes, I use glyphosate, but also, hi, my name's Nicole and this is my story.
Yeah, exactly. Humanizing it. Or treat everybody like you would treat your best friends.
So we'll switch gears just a little bit. And, we're in Arizona here. And so we see a lot of lawmakers making regulations about agriculture and about water that we need to survive as an industry. So they're making these decisions about agriculture without actually knowing about agriculture. So,
Hmm.
we talked about kind of education and how an online presence is almost crucial at this point for ag education to the consumer. But what about that lawmaker? What can we do at that level where we can advocate to the people who are essentially going to be controlling how we're going to be operating for the next 10, 20, 50 years?
Yeah. Well, rule number one is show up. Rule number one is figure out their trail, where they are, what's going on. Introduce yourself. Lawmakers in policy, they're people just like us, trying to make the right decisions, just like us. And I think sometimes there's this intimidation level that doesn't need to be there. They want to hear from you. And if they don't hear from you, they're going to get their information from some activist or somebody that is out there. So the loudest voices are the ones that people hear, but the loudest voices doesn't always mean the most correct voice. So as farmers, we have to be the loudest voice in the room. We have to grow a pair. If you aren't doing it, somebody else will do it and it's not going to work. So, building friendships, inviting them on your farm, having them into your home for dinner, showing them around the farm, introducing them to your family, what they're doing. Offer a ride along, get them in their biosecurity and getting them out on a farm. Everything we can do to build those relationships so that when something comes across their desk, and they don't know the answer, you are on their speed dial, checking in and building that relationship just like you would build with your friends, family, coworkers, anybody else is imperative.
As Farm Bureau is an organization, that's what we're about. We're about policy and advocacy and, showing up for the farmer. But I think it's important to share also, it's important for the farmer to show up. But again, like they want to hear from you. And we have in our area, so we're in Maricopa County, which is home to Phoenix, right? So we have this dichotomy of we're heavy in agriculture, but we also are heavy in population, right? So a lot of our representatives and senators, their constituents are people that live in a high rise downtown. And that's where they're getting their information from. And so, how do we bring them? It has to be from an educational perspective, right? Because I think a lot of times, as farmers and people in agriculture, we get so passionate about what we do because we care a lot and we care so much that when we're trying to share this story or change the minds of those that are out there, it can be seen as aggressive or combative almost. We want to argue because we know what we're doing is good and right, and we're so passionate about it. So, how do you approach those kind of conversations with someone who is, strictly on the other side of the fence from you?
Yeah, well, we have to put ourselves in their shoes. We have to have empathy for their situation and we have to meet them where they're at. So, oftentimes, I feel like in agriculture, if we are inviting people to the farm, that's great and good, but it also might attract people that have too like mindedness. So, go ahead and immerse yourself into the movers and shakers of downtown Phoenix. Find out who the socialites are, find out where these like a good place to go start is like a philanthropy benefit or something, right? Like some type of event where the who's who of Phoenix are there and you get to meet them and you in the farming side of things may feel like a fish out of water. You may feel like you don't belong. That's nonsense. We all belong. We all have a story to share. And meeting them where they're at and building those relationships in their circles to say, yeah, I'm a farmer. They're going to be like, what? Tell us more. Perfect example. I am the rodeo to the rodeo story, so I'm going from LA and Chicago to rural America. And now when I go back to visit LA or Chicago, my friends are like so excited to introduce me because I'm the friend that's different, right? Like they're like, you got to meet Michelle. She's so cool. She does stuff with farmers and she advocates for farmers and it's so cool. And then people are like, what? And then it's like all eyes are on you because you are the outsider, because they do want to learn more where their food comes from. And 90% of the time they're going to say, it's such great work you're doing. We really need more organic, small scale regenerative farms. And like, they have no idea that like farming is all different shapes and sizes, and it does not have to have a specific label. Actually, a vast majority of our food that's produced doesn't come with the small organic artisan, whatever practice label. So just being the voice of reason that can help people open their eyes and build yourself in their circles. That's the time when after you have built the relationships that you can say, all right, now it's time to come to my world.
I'm not a farmer anymore. I used to be, but now I'm representing the farmers. And even myself, putting on the suit with my boots and walking up to the Capitol, it feels intimidating. And, you think,
Yeah.
I don't fit in here. What can I do? What can little old me have an impact on this? But the reality is it's a huge impact.
Yeah. And also, even a little something you said right there, too, to consider. This may or may not be helpful, but showing up in your boots, right? Like you show up. I showed up in boots, ruining your black tie affair. Um, but try to, I mean, when I show up to events, I don't show up in boots. I don't dress like a farmer. I don't look like I'm from rural America. I look just like them and I dress just like them. I bring in my big city bougie and I'll carry my Louis Vuitton and I'll just look like I fit right in. And then when they find out I'm a farmer, it's almost like you connect with them more though, because they would have never guessed that. They'd be like, oh, like, look at this girl put together in her heels and her, and her Louis and whatever. And all of a sudden though, they feel like they have more in common with you to connect. So trying to blend in means meeting them where they're at and speaking their language. Like I'm a farmer advocate, but I'm also very much I like nice city girl things. I'm going to be in Fort Lauderdale and Miami tonight, so it's kind of like you can infiltrate the big city world, but not look like a farmer, have nobody know, but you build more friendships and relationships when you feel included in part of their circle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you do have an opportunity there in Phoenix because Phoenix is bougie. Go to Scottsdale. I was just in Scottsdale a couple months ago. I had a great time. And my friends in Scottsdale, none of them have anything to do with farming. And I always love being the only farmer at the table because it's like they don't get the opportunity, but you already have trust and love and buy-in because you're in the same friend circle.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I'll take all the tips on walking in heels that you can provide. And
I mean, be comfortable. It's not necessarily that it's a bad thing, but it's like just everybody in agriculture in general, just step out of your comfort zone a little bit and just see what happens. You might surprise yourself.
We get so comfortable in our work boots and our jeans. And then, you take us out of that atmosphere and it is so much like a fish out of water.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, it's very true.
So kind of along that same line, we have fewer and fewer people involved in agriculture, right? Less than 2% are farmers. And as Farm Bureau, we want to have our voice heard, right? We're the voice of agriculture. That's our job. But our farmers are busy. And so if you talk about immersing yourself in these events and showing up and showing out and being that voice at the table, but they don't always have enough time to join us there. And so as an organization, we want to bring more people in. How do we create this educated pool of advocates that are not necessarily in production agriculture, but are knowledgeable and passionate enough about the industry to want to dedicate their time to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can go along with building relationships at academia level as well, finding all of the students and working very closely with them that are into communications, ag communications and marketing and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, career fairs, there's things at high schools and colleges and everything where we can build on those relationships. There's a lot of different agribusinesses and groups that have communications teams, or people are working with social media influencers. So influencers are a really big part of that. Finding people that have a loud, prominent voice on social that are maybe spreading misinformation, inviting them in for that and say, hey, we love and appreciate your platform. Would you like to come out to the farm and share a little bit more of that? So I think sometimes finding people that are on the wrong side of the argument, they're not a lost cause. They've just never had an opportunity for somebody to reach out to them and politely correct them and build a new relationship. So keeping all of those different ideas in mind and figuring out who are the best brand strategists and partners to help us get the message out. So yes, a lot of in-person events and showing up and social media and all that helps, but also, yeah, how can you take that circle? Because if you are one person and you share a post that reaches 1,000 people, what if those 1,000 people then reach 1,000 more people? It really becomes a web very quickly to get the word out. So sometimes you just have to have a more of a strategic campaign of who's going to be here to help us spread the message. A lot of agribusinesses and commodity boards and everything like that in general are now doing influencer tours, like media tours, where they have members of the media and just spend a day or two, couple days, just come on out. Here are our experts from Extension, from Farm Bureau, from the farmers themselves, from all of these things that together, collectively and collaboratively, can move mountains. So between the policy, consumers, perception, businesses, farmers, it's really about unifying and coming together on so many different fronts.
Yeah, that unifying, collaborative work that we have between organizations, I think is key because, we're
Yeah.
always stronger together. Did you have any advice for someone who, kind of like your story, that Rodeo Drive, I've never had anything to do with agriculture, but I want to learn more and I am really passionate about sharing and advocating for that. What is, I guess, the best way for someone in that position to get involved?
Oh, well, you just have to build a relationship. I mean, everything is about relationships. So just send them a DM on Instagram, right? Like the people that are the most passionate about it don't know what they don't know. So just being able to message them, hey, I've been following your Instagram content, or hey, I see you're out there doing this or that. There's just a million ways to reach out and have that open door conversation and send some resources, send some emails, articles, care package, invite them on an event, and just take them out to dinner. I mean, it's just really just getting to know people. Is friendships and relationships are everything for sure.
Really, I think a ton of education just comes from your network and your relationships. And I feel like
For
I learn
sure.
something new every time I sit down and have lunch with somebody, and you just keep
Yeah,
accumulating.
like I live near Gainesville, Florida, and took it upon myself to go to the university and their agriculture program. And when they learned that, hey, the farm babe lives in Gainesville, it's like now I get invited to all the things. I get invited to all the University of Florida dinners, special events, banquets, football games. So a beautiful way to cross over. Everybody loves sports. Everybody eats. There you go. So it's been really amazing to work in booths and see and connect with people in ag, but here you are in the middle of like a college football stadium full of people that are like, what? You got like a giant inflatable cow and something goofy to create a conversation. And the next thing you know, you're slowly but surely chipping away and educating people. And if you can reach one, you can teach one. And you never know who you're going to come across that can have a big impact. So
I think that that's so great. If you can reach one, you can teach one. So every time that you open and share your story, it's another opportunity. Awesome. Well, I appreciate everything today. This was such a great chat and a lot of good information. And I would say any final words from Florida?
just keep on keeping on. And, it's just our industry has to be a little bit less humble, and like be a little bit more bold. And it's not that hard. You just build friendships, just build relationships, whether that's Instagram or beyond, whether that's online or in person. There's the education. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. There's really not much of an excuse for people to not be some type of advocate in their own way. I had one woman reach out who was like, she wrote a children's book. She messaged me and said, I saw your keynote. I love what you're doing. And thank you for inspiring me to advocate for agriculture in my way. And so that's what it's about, is finding out what works for you. Maybe writing a children's book is your path. Maybe a podcast is your path. Maybe agritourism or an ag in the classroom volunteer program or something like that is your path. Really reach out to your core and who you are and figure out what it is that you really love to do more than anything. I love myth busting. That's my jam. I love taking food labels, breaking them down, and reaching the consumer in a way that's outside of our industry, which is what my background is. So it means a lot to me. So what is it about you that you love? Do you love life with cows? Do you love the relationships you build in your community? Do you love education or promoting different events, like supporting food brands that support us, like a Culver's or something? So just keeping true to who you are. But yeah, that would kind of be my final thoughts, is just keep an open mind and do the best you can with what really resonates with you at your core. But yeah, that would probably be about it.
That's such great advice. And, I thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule. I know it's hard to cram it in, but we so appreciate you joining us today. And Farm Bureau always loves a chance to get to chat with Michelle Miller.
Yeah, thanks. Check out, if anybody has any questions, I'm thefarmbabe.com. And I'm also doing an event, which is the world's first floating farm conference, which is farmcruise.com. We've got hundreds of farmers coming together on a cruise ship for lots of farm tours in the islands and meet and greets and farmer themed dress up nights. And we've got game night, farmer trivia night. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if anybody's looking for a vacation, the Farm Cruise is where it's at. But yeah, check out, I'm at the Farm Babe on social media, or Farm Babe on Facebook. So I hope to see you guys on social media or on the boat.
What a great opportunity.
But yeah, we've got some social media influencers coming in the farming community too. So some of the biggest names, if you're into social media, like Jimmy D. Jones or Farmer Grace or the Farm Fit Mama, or gosh, there's so many. Annalise Wagner, Modern Day Farm Chick, Field Rose. There's a lot of really great people that are going to be on the ship to hang out with as well. So yep, I'm doing that with the influencers, the events, writing, podcasting, public speaking, social media, all the things. And so it just goes to show for all the listeners out there that it's like, there's a number of ways, and it's also a way to diversify your farm, of doing a media outlet to share your story. It can be a part of your brand, your business, your social media, advocacy, sales, and marketing for products you're selling from the farm, or just as an advocate for it. So thank you as well, to Farm Bureau and everything you guys do for continuing to build those relationships.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you so much. A huge thanks to Michelle Miller, Farm Babe, for taking your time to chat today with us. It was a great conversation. I'm so glad that we were able to highlight some of these topics today. And thanks for tuning in to Arizona Agriculture Connection. Be sure to check us out every Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in today. And remember, Farm Bureau has a place for you. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your friends on socials. You can also visit our website, maricopacountyfb.org, for more information and to submit a topic you want to learn about. Remember to tune in every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts. A huge thank you to Paloma Ready Mix and Materials for supporting our agriculture producers and this podcast. Maricopa County Farm Bureau, bringing you the stories of real families, real farms, and real food. I'm Nicole Clements, signing off. Catch you next week.